Welcome to the Constantly Consistent podcast with me, Coach Austin Cap. I'll be your host for these episodes. And this is a show for CrossFit coaches, athletes, enthusiasts, affiliate members, whoever is interested in understanding the sport of CrossFit and wants to improve through consistency, not chaos. Myself, I've been involved in the sport for over, I don't know, say 5 years now, twofold as a competitor and as a coach. I would say most of my experience comes from being involved in the sport as a coach, working with individuals, whether directly or indirectly, from every level, from the open all the way up to the games level. And really the main things that you see in the sport being tested over and over again and ways that we can improve it. The goal with this podcast will be to go over certain tests, certain competitions, certain things that are currently in the focus of the sport, and dissect them a little bit and figuring out what really drives performance, how we can approach certain things, how we can approach events, how we can approach our own training with smarter programming and just evolve ourselves and the understanding of the sport, which is a challenging thing to do because if you know the sport well, the sport is always changing, it's always evolving. There's sometimes different iterations of what the sport is being tested, different formats come out year after year, but we're going to do our best to try to bring some organization, some clarity to the chaos that can be the CrossFit sport itself. So, for today's episode, I wanted to jump in to Heavy Isabel, which is, for those of you that don't know, I'll take a step back. It's one of the current workouts that's being tested for the CrossFit Games season in all divisions. So not only the open or the main division, if you could say, also the Masters division, and also in these qualifiers that are happening throughout the world. And Heavy Isabel is a test in CrossFit, which is 30 snatches for time. And those 30 snatches are at the weight for men, 225 pounds or 102 kilos. And for the ladies, 155 pounds and 70 kilos. Now, this is a great test because A, it's being standardized by all the competitions and all the divisions across the world. So one of the benefits of having a standardized test is that you can gather lots of data and a lot of different data points on individuals, different age groups, and learn and see what are top times, what are different divisions getting, and how that test is being approached and delivered on by different levels of fitness. So I'm a big fan of it, and I know a lot of people that are doing the qualifiers have been enjoying it. And just a side note on that, it's heavy because the original test is regular Isabel or just Isabel. There's no regular Isabel, which is 135, 95 for the men and the ladies respectively, which is much lighter, right? So it's almost 100 pounds different for the men. And then I guess for the ladies, that's about 50 pound difference there. So Heavy Isabel, well, okay, what is it and what is it testing? So we went over what it was, which is 30 snatches per time. Those can be squat or power. And in my opinion, it is testing snatch battery or the individual's battery. And what we mean by battery, or when we say battery, is basically if you look at or if you think about the muscles and or the person performing the test, one of our energy systems that powers our muscles and affects how we can snatch or lift a weight is our CP, our creatine phosphate system, right? So this is the system that relates to those quick, short bursts of energy when lifting weights. Okay. So as you can imagine, if something is heavy or challenging load, I'm going to most likely use, I'm oversimplifying here, right? But I'm going to most likely use most or a lot of my battery to execute the lift. And as the name implies, it's a battery. So energy is being depleted from that source and it needs to recharge. So this test is essentially testing the individual's ability or their battery and their ability to recover and recharge in between repetitions. Now, how is this different than a 1RM? For example, myself, my 1RM snatch is 250. Okay. This test is 225 pounds. So pretty close. For obvious starters, the when you're testing a 1RM, your CP, right? The creatine phosphate is a big part of that, but you're only doing that once, hopefully, right? You're doing that one tough contraction and you're done, right? For the battery, now you're asking the person or the individual to do a heavy load 30 times in this test. So can you, right there, as you can see the stark difference, there's 1 RM, that's probably 3 seconds, 4 seconds max. And then you have this snatch battery test, which the fastest times for the men is 3:58 and for the ladies is 3:55. So right there, that should show you a huge polarity between what's being asked from a 1 RM and a battery. So building on that, yes, having a high 1 RM or having 1 rep max, having strong numbers or high strength numbers will help with your snatch battery, but that is not the best indicator and way of showing that someone will do well on the battery test. For example, if you looked at Olympic weightlifters who would definitely have way higher 1 rep maxes on their snatch or their clean or any other type of heavy lift compared to a CrossFitter, I would be willing to bet unless they train it, their battery probably isn't as developed as a CrossFitter. So it's a very specific test to our sport, which is CrossFit. Okay, so the test is Isabel. We went over what's being tested, the snatch battery, right? Thinking about how fast we can do these tough contractions and then recharge and recover in between each bout or each repetition so that we can do as much work as possible. How does it relate to the 1 RM? And we went over that. So to take a step back, the fastest times in the world for the men by Guy Malheiros was 3:58, lightning fast, and for the ladies, for Abby Dominant, 3:55. For most of the top competitors, they're coming in between that 4 to 5 minutes on the male and the female side. So this characteristic, this battery test, is something that we've seen repeatedly in the sport on all different levels. This is the semifinal level this year. Last year in 2024, this was tested in the quarterfinals for individuals. And that was, I believe, workout 3, which was the ascending ladder of clean and jerks. I don't have it right here, but bear with me. And essentially, what that test was also testing was individuals, not their fitness, yes, but their battery. So last year it was 10 clean and jerks. At the men, I believe it was 135, rest a minute, then 10 clean and jerks, 185, rest a minute, 10 clean and jerks, 225, rest a minute, and then max effort or as many reps as possible in the remaining time at 245. And as you saw scores on that, it wasn't who had the highest 1 RM that won that test. It was who was able to repeatedly lift a fraction or a percentage, usually, obviously, the lower percentage, the better, of their 1 RM for reps. So that was 245 for men last year. And we'll see this theme, I guarantee it, again and again in the sport of CrossFit. It's something that CrossFit likes to test. And it's something that all competitors, whether you're in the open individual division or you're a masters, no matter what age group you are, or the teens, you will see this test. So this is something that I encourage all coaches / clients / athletes to embrace and to work on in their training, because it will not only make you better at the sport, it will also make you more confident, but it will also help with strength development in your Olympic lifts. Of course, it's not the same thing as lifting your 1 RM, but it is allowing you or your clients to get more confident in lifting a percentage of their heavier lifts, and also allowing them to build that confidence so that they can express the test of Isabel. Now, things to consider, because I want to get into how would I actually train that and how would I do that with the client and how can people do it. First off, if 225 is for the men and 155 for the girls is above your 1 RM, then obviously we need to get stronger, and battery testing wouldn't apply for this test. It would still apply to you, but it wouldn't apply to this test specifically. Of course, you need to be strong enough to actually lift the load, but you could still try this test if you wanted to scale the weights to perhaps 185 for the men and 125 for the ladies, or you could even bump it down to 155 for the men, 105 for the ladies. there's all different ways of doing it. But first is you have to be strong enough. And as we know, CrossFit is an endurance sport with strong people in it. It's just the way that the sport goes. So you need to be strong enough. But let's consider all things that, okay, I am strong enough. My snatch is well above the threshold for 225 or 155. Okay, now how would you improve it? There again, there is no one way to do anything. A couple of examples that I've gathered, that I've done in my own training, that I've done with clients and have seen lots of success. One of them could simply be treating it like an EMOM. So, say you have a percentage of the weight, or you wanted to train, you could do 225, but you don't feel like your battery is that sharp. You could either A, do multiple on the minute reps with 225 or a bit lighter. So, for example, really simple would be a 5-minute EMOM, one squat snatch or one power snatch at 225, keep the same load across. Something to consider is manipulating the rest. So it would be very different to do an on the minute snatch, which would really be like 5 seconds of work, 55 seconds of rest, which is limited rest when it's a higher percentage, versus one snatch, rest 2 to 3 minutes. Right there, you're manipulating the client's or yours recovery window, and you're either making it longer and allowing the battery to recharge much fuller, so you're not really stressing it that much, or you're purposely doing it on a limited clock, so you are in fact challenging the abilities and the muscles' ability to produce the power again and again on limited rest, which is what we would try to train. So an on the minute, super simple way of doing it that's effective. Another way you could do it would be interval weight training, sometimes referred to as IWTs. And think about if my snatch was 300 pounds, we want to take 70 to 75% of that 1 RM. And what we could do is 3 sets, and it could write something like this. So you could say 5 squat snatches or power snatches or just snatch, and let the client snatch it however they want at 70 to 75% of their 1 RM. And say this is against a 3 to 4 minute clock, and then in the remaining time, easy spin on an erg of choice. Now, the erg of choice and the easy spin is not really doing too much for the battery. It's just adding in additional work, and it's challenging the body's overall system to recover. But the real gold there is those 5 snatches at that 70 to 75%, and you would instruct or encourage the client to go do them fast. So fast singles, so you're challenging yourself to recharge in between sets. You're trying to get good sets in, good reps in, and build their ability, not only physically, but mentally, that I can keep moving these weights over and over again. Another opportunity or thing that you could do to train this, and I would say this would be maybe a little bit further in a cycle, would be doing AMRAPs, like quite simply as many reps as possible at ascending loads. So, for example, 3 sets, or rather, look at it as 3 different sets. So, set one would be a 3-minute AMRAP at, let's call it 185 snatches, rest 3 minutes. Then, second one would be a 2-minute AMRAP at 205 snatches for reps. Snatches for reps. 2-minute rest. And then the last one would be 1 minute for reps, snatches at 225. Now, of course, that's going to pre-fatigue them. They're going to be tired going into it, but it is going to expose them to the stimulus, which is accumulating as many repetitions as possible with a heavy barbell, with a heavy load, with minimal amounts of rest, and basically teaching the body how to do a really tough contraction, recover as quickly as it can, and do another one. So those are, of course, just high level examples. But just something that the real theme you want to keep in mind there is that it's a heavy load, right? Around 70, 75%, and you can build that load over weeks. That there are multiple reps in succession, so that you're not just doing one and then walking away, right? You're doing 3, 4, 5, 6 in a row, challenging the body's ability to recharge in between those sets. And that each week, there's also essentially less rest, right? So you're gradually exposing the body to less and less rest over time, because the more rest, the body's not, well, with more rest, the body is essentially going to get used to that. And if you're trying to train them for something like 225 reps 30 snatches for time at 225 pounds, you're not really training the specific property that we want there. So always remember that as well. We're trying to train the specific property that's being asked in a test. Heavy Isabel, the client's or the athlete's ability to have their snatch battery fire and recharge over and over and over and over again. Other things to consider, obviously, strength training will be a part of this as well. The higher my 1RM is, the lower the percentage the test would be. Obviously, it's not going to cost me as much, but you still need to train barbell work and battery work in addition to getting your 1RMs up as well. Something else that just popped into my mind is efficiency and technique. I can be very strong and maybe my battery's pretty good, but if my technique starts to go out of the window when I get tired, or if I accumulate a certain amount of reps past a certain threshold, that's going to bite me in the butt as well. So, as coaches, as clients, as athletes, we want to improve not only our strength, not only our battery, but our efficiency and our ability to get into these good positions. Technique always. I'm a big proponent of technique in my own training, so highly recommend that. And then also experiencing or exposing ourselves and clients to those tests of what it feels like to actually do 30 barbell reps in a row. It is a very unique stimulus if you've never done it. It's something that I love to do myself and with clients, but you need to expose them to that. So don't forget about just the benefit that comes with exposing people to these tests as well. So that was our first episode, and we dived into but into Heavy Isabel, how it's being tested, why it's being tested, why is it important, and how does that help me improve in the sport. For my next episode, I'm going to be joined by my friend Joe Piero, who just did the individual semifinals because those just came out last weekend. And we're going to get him to jump on and talk about what he felt like the tests were testing, his experience, and then him and I will just have some dialogue about ways that we would approach those tests for a better score in the future. So thanks for tuning in. I hope that you enjoyed the podcast, that you got something from it. And I would like to remind you that the Costly Consistent Show is part of the Coach RX podcast network, and that's a collection of shows designed to elevate the coaching conversation. You can find a full link with the full lineup in the show notes. If you have any questions, reach out to me and stay consistent.